Let's continue the conversation now, and to do so, we are joined by the former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCaughey. She Skypes in from the Big Apple this evening. Also in that mighty big city, but from Newsmax, New York, is attorney Mark Smith. Mark is Senior Fellow in Law and Public Policy at King's College. He's also a New York Times best-selling author. Thanks to you both for your time on Newsmax Prime, and we've heard all of this talk about the electoral path to the presidency for Mr. Trump to be very tight. And yet we're hearing reports from Drudge and other sources that Mr. Trump in early voting is way outperforming Mitt Romney both in Florida and in North Carolina. Betsy, will this momentum take him to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, it's certainly possible. And many of the people who are betting on this race are betting on Trump. I've done a lot of interviews with British media today, and they're calling this Brexit 2. Of course, we don't know the outcome yet, but as you may recall, in the Brexit vote, all the polls had the Brexit folks way down, and the elite, the establishment, way up, and the results were just the opposite. So this is a race in which Donald Trump represents the common man and woman, the people who go to work every day, who pay their taxes, and who are getting a raw deal from Washington.
So, Mark, let me turn to you. Betsy put so much in there as she talked about Brexit. I was coming through London that day, making connections. I got a stack of newspapers and was reading. It was almost palpable how the establishment was trying to hang on to the EU, but how the people had another idea. Do we replicate that in our presidential election tomorrow on this side of the Atlantic?
Yeah, I think we do. I think the polling in this election has been rather silly. I think if you look at the polling in the primaries, you look at poll after poll after poll that concluded that Donald Trump could not be the Republican nominee. Obviously, those polls proved to be crazily not predictive, right? I think the reality here is, I like to tell, if you want to know what people are really thinking, JD, I think you look to how they conduct themselves and how they behave. And if you look at how the Democrats are behaving in the last 24 to 48 hours, they're going back to Philadelphia, they're going back to Michigan, they're going back to Detroit, they're going back to so-called blue strongholds, trying to refortify what they thought they had won several weeks ago. All you need to know about where the Democrats are worried about, is what are they doing? They're not going to Arizona, they're not going to Georgia, they're not going to these states that are so-called swing states. They're literally going back to what they thought to be their strongholds, and because it's slipping away.
And when we come back to you both, this is great. This is a very good way to get warmed up. We want to come back to you both to really dig in to what's ahead. And also coming up, did President Obama actually encourage illegals to vote? We'll discuss that and more with Betsy and Mark when we return. We continue our election eve coverage now by focusing on the swing state of North Carolina. Ed Berliner takes a closer look in tonight's edition of Battleground 2016.
Look how much African American communities have suffered under Democratic control. To those I say the following: what do you have to lose by trying something new like Trump?
My question is, what does America have to gain by electing Trump?
A lot, if you ask Trump supporter Bob Shue.
I think that's his purpose, is to get people in America thinking differently about what's happened in the past and make it better in the future.
History tells us North Carolina should not be a battleground state for Republicans, but 2016 is anything but ordinary, and Donald Trump has his work cut out for him here. 15 electoral votes at stake, more registered Democrats here than Republicans, but there are enough independent voters to turn the tide. With the population consisting of the voters that have a penchant for Trump's stand on policy, the question is how much certain issues could work against him. The divisions here begin with House Bill 2, or the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, legislation that has already cost the state millions of dollars in potential business, especially from the loss of the NCAA and Atlantic Coast Conference athletic postseason games. because of objections to what is more commonly known as the bathroom bill, which is directly connected to another fighting point in North Carolina that will affect the down ticket, no matter what Clinton or Trump do. The seemingly never-ending fight against gerrymandering, the political manipulation of districts to ensure a certain party has the majority, and a belief that practice continues because of Republican desire.
A new group calling itself North Carolina Business Leaders for Accountability says current districts are hurting business in the state. This morning, the group said HB 2 passed as a result of gerrymandering and that the law is hurting the economy of downtown Raleigh.
I've encouraged these businesses to come to North Carolina. I've discouraged any kinds of boycotts. We want them here for their jobs, but we also want them to fight House Bill 2 when they're here. And Governor McCaughey has gone on the attack against businesses who have opposed House Bill 2, even those that have stayed here, even those who have jobs here. He's attacked them.
North Carolina Attorney General Roy Cooper, the Democrat nominee for governor against Republican incumbent Pat McCrory. Just one of the battles being played out in the old North State. Let's head northward via Skype to welcome back in from New York City Betsy McCaughey, the former lieutenant governor of the Empire State, and likewise in the Big Apple from Newsmax New York, attorney Mark Smith. Mark's the senior fellow in law and public policy at the King's College in New York. Mark, I got to tell you, North Carolina, perhaps earlier than a lot of other states, had a huge influx of illegal immigrants. And now President Obama, by my lights, is encouraging illegals to vote. Take a listen to what he said during an interview over the weekend with Gina Rodriguez.
Many of the millennials, dreamers, undocumented citizens, and I call them citizens because they contribute to this country, are fearful of voting. So if I vote, will immigration know where I live? Will they come for my family and deport us?
Not true.
Okay.
And the reason is, first of all, when you vote, you are a citizen yourself, and there is not a situation where the voting rolls somehow are transferred over and people start investigating, etc. The sanctity of the vote is strictly confidential.
So the sanctity of vote is confidential. Yeah, citizens have a right, citizens who are registered to vote have a right to the secret ballot, but I've got to tell you, Mark, that sounds like the president is deliberately blurring the line.
I think there's very little doubt that Barack Obama and the Democratic Party like voter fraud and have benefited from it for many years, going all the way back to at least JFK's win over Richard Nixon. And I think that the best evidence of this is that the Democrats simply don't like voter ID law, right? You know, you have to show an ID to get into your building here in New York and anywhere else to board an airplane, and yet to exercise your right to vote, you don't have to show a photo ID, which means, of course, it's not just the right to vote, it's to make sure that your vote is actually counted. But if you let other people basically vote illegally, it's canceling out your vote. And so forth. It's not about the right to vote, it's about having the vote counted. The Democrats just want people to vote often and repeatedly, and that's just the reality of it. And that's why they oppose a lot of these very basic restrictions on making sure that people vote the right way. And I'm not surprised that Barack Obama would try to blur the line, since he did it with the Constitution on amnesty and over and over again with executive orders and the like.
This is part of the biggest issue at stake in this election, the rule of law. The Democrats have abandoned the rule of law. We now have two major political parties in this country, the Republican Party and the Banana Republic Party, formerly known as the Democrats. They defend illegal immigration. They defend padded voter rolls. They defend a Justice Department that violates its own laws in leaking information about investigations to the Clinton campaign. I could go on and on. We don't have justice in this country anymore because the Democratic Party has politicized the very instruments of justice.
And despite all the preening from the Democrats and the prattling from their allies in the corporate media culture, Hans von Spakovsky, former member of the Federal Elections Commission, says it is a fact that non-citizens are registered and voting in the 2016 election. Here's the way he put it on Breitbart programming.
The biggest fear I have right now is that people who aren't U.S. citizens are going to illegally vote in the election. We know for a fact from all kinds of different reports we've had and cases that there are non-citizens registered in voting all over the country.
So what do we do,
That's
Betsy?
right. And the Pew Foundation, hardly a right-wing group, has reported that at least 1 out of every 8 voter registrations is faulty. It's either a dead person, it's a duplicate, or it's someone who's not entitled to vote, including in most cases illegal immigrants. And the fact is, every time the Republicans object, the Democrats call us racist. That's not it. It doesn't matter where you're from. You're not allowed to vote unless you're a citizen.
So what do we do about this, Mark?
Well, the truth is it's late in the day to do anything about it for tomorrow as a practical matter. But the way, of course, that the Republicans have been trying to do something about it is to have there be photo ID laws to be able to vote. But every time the Republicans pass such laws, the courts strike it down, which is a critical reason why we need Donald Trump in the White House, because otherwise Hillary Clinton will put her judges on the Supreme Court, her judges on the federal bench, and they will go out there and make sure that all attempts to stop voter fraud will be exactly the way Betsy said, which is struck down on so-called racism grounds, when all it is good policy to make sure that the vote that you get to cast is actually counted and not canceled out by illegal immigrants and others who shouldn't be voting.
Last night, really this morning, Donald Trump held a midnight rally in Virginia, encouraging people to get out and vote, following Democrat Governor Terry McAuliffe's decision to pardon about, 60,000 felons? Here's what Mr. Trump had to say.
You have to get out and you have to vote. Your governor has illegally given voting rights to 60,000 felons. He's letting criminals cancel out the votes of law-abiding citizens. You have to get everyone you know to the polls. We are going to win. We are going to have one of the great victories of all time.
A confident Trump, but I just have to ask you both. I'll begin with you, Betsy. Is this felon vote enough to swing the state of Virginia into Mrs. Clinton's column? 20 seconds to each of you.
If all those felons come out, yes, it is. And the Republican Party should be lawyering up right now to challenge the results in Virginia and get the evidence of whether or how many of these felons actually cast ballots.
What about it,
Mark?
Yeah,
but I actually think that in addition, yes, it's definitely enough to swing the state of Virginia in favor of Hillary Clinton. But you also have to look at the things going on in Northern Virginia and the growth of that area of big government, progressives that want big government because they're government contractors. They're basically voting themselves bigger paychecks because bigger government means more money for Northern Virginia. And that is something you have to look very carefully about, the rest of Virginia may be NRA territory, but Northern Virginia is really part of the Beltway.
It's something we will be watching with great interest tomorrow night as we monitor the returns. For now, Betsy and Mark, we thank you very much for your time.